If you've been arrested for drunk driving, the first call you need to make is to attorney Ted Morgan. You can't afford to go it alone. You need to know your rights. You need someone with the experience to put your DUI behind you. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Call 706-317-5733. Ask for Ted.
Call Ted Morgan Law when you need a lifeline.
Hello and welcome back to DUI Law, Real Talk with Ted Morgan. Ted is a seasoned trial attorney who has spent the last 30 years defending drivers in DUI and criminal cases in Georgia. I'm Lisa Mosby, and in today's episode, we're talking about Georgia's DUI lookback periods and how the 5-year and 10-year rules actually work. Thanks for joining me again today, Ted.
Thank you for having me again, Lisa. This is great.
Ted, in Georgia, in a DUI case, what does the term look-back period actually refer to?
So there are two, typically, because you've got on the criminal side, that being the actual DUI charge. Georgia looks back 10 years. They're going to look back from the date of this current arrest and go back 10 years. And if you have any DUI convictions from an arrest within that 10 years, then it ratchets up the punishment. So it's very important if you do have prior convictions. If you had a prior arrest and you weren't convicted of DUI, doesn't come into play. But the other look back is a 5-year in Georgia, but that's for Georgia licensees. If you come through, get a DUI Georgia and you're licensed by Alabama, this really doesn't have a whole lot to do with you. But the administrative suspension side for a Georgia licensee, they're looking back 5 years. So it's not as harsh, naturally. You can be outside of 5 years a lot easier than 10, right? So if you have one within the 5 years, same thing. The suspension of your license ratchets up. And what you have to do to get your license back, if you ever can, really ratchets up. So that's what the look back is about. 10 years on the criminal and 5 years on a Georgia licensee.
And then how does a prior DUI within that look back window change how current charges are classified or handled at the onset? You'd mentioned that there was a longer license suspension. Are there other things involved?
There are. So yeah, you can start on the licensing side. If you've got a prior DUI conviction on that Georgia license, or maybe one that Georgia DDS just knows about within 5 years, then if you're looking at a second suspension from a DUI within 5 years, well, now you're looking at technically a 3-year suspension versus 12 months on your first DUI. And during that 3 years, you have to do ignition interlock for 12 months to get your license back early or at all. And as far as on the criminal side, it always makes a difference if you have a prior DUI. The question is, how long ago was it? Sometimes if it's way back, the prosecutors aren't too concerned. But if you're within the 10-year window, they have to be concerned. And it tends to get their attention. It tends to mean that some deals that might have been there are not going to be there. Deals, I mean, is negotiated pleas to resolve your case short of a trial. And, naturally, sometimes, again, depending on, hey, if it was only a couple of years ago, then it can make jail time or avoiding jail time a lot harder. Just depending on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions get real excited on that second one. But that's basically it. Just, on the punishment side, of course, and then on the licensing side, it can make things a lot harder.
When the court is looking at someone's prior DUI history, are they looking for anything specific? What details tend to carry the most weight? Is there any difference?
Well, there can be. You're getting into the specifics of each case. So if you've got a prior DUI and it was borderline, maybe on what your blood alcohol was, or maybe they didn't have it, that's obviously different than if they look back and say, well, 2 years ago you were arrested and your your blood alcohol that was admissible was 2 times the legal rate, and here you are doing it again. So it just, they go back and try to see, it obviously there's some repetition, but what is really going on in each case. And so naturally, just the way the prosecutor is going to look at it is going to change if they see a repetition and what they consider to be just kind of ignoring the fact that you're way over the limit, or ignoring the law. They get more excited about that.
And you mentioned a word, interlock, and you may have to have that for 12 months before you be able to get your license back. Can you speak to what that is?
And when this usually crops up in Georgia is when you're on a second suspension in 5, because it's statutory. I mean, this is not the court doing it. This is Georgia licensing you, saying, hey, this is your second DUI conviction, second suspension from a DUI within 5 years. So now we're going to make you do ignition interlock. And what that typically means is that you go out to some provider that sells these things. We have one that we refer to folks to because we just think they do a good job. We don't, no money for us, nothing in it for us. Just knowing they take care of our clients. But they install a device on your automobile, and that's what the statute says, is that any vehicle titled to you. So if you have more than one, technically you're supposed to do it on all of them. And it's a device that you literally blow into to crank the car. And now you're on a zero tolerance. It's not about how much alcohol, it's about, is there any? And so you are basically on a probationary period with your license, to where you blow into the interlock and you better have clean breath every time for that 12-month span of time that you're on it, because that's the condition, is that you do not violate the ignition interlock. And if you do, then, well, now you're what generally happens is you've lost the ability for early reinstatement because you failed to complete the ignition interlock probation, and they put you back on it. But now you're stuck with 3 years, which is a lot different than 18 months, right? So, but that's what that's about.
And does that apply both to in-state and out-of-state drivers?
So that's where it's confusing. Georgia can only do that to Georgia drivers. You have a set of laws for the criminal side, and you have a set of laws for the licensing side. Well, if I'm not a Georgia driver and I get a DUI in Georgia, pretty much all Georgia can do is penalize me on the criminal side, which may include taking a Georgia DUI class as well. But it gets reported back to your home state. And so then, say you're an Alabama or a Florida driver, then they do whatever they do with it. Typically, most states, if they find out you received a conviction for a DUI in Georgia, and their laws outlaw DUI, right, then they say, we treat you just like you got it here. So then you deal with the suspension issues in your home state.
Thank you for clarifying that. I don't think many folks realize that you're not out of trouble when you get back home when you get a ticket out of state.
Usually not. Yeah, the court's supposed to report it to your home state, and it's I don't have any recollection of a client saying it never hit the system. Yeah, they're pretty good at that.
And then, Ted, are there situations where an older DUI still ends up affecting a current case, even if it falls outside of those standard look-back windows?
It does. It just depends on a lot there, because I've had clients that they were maybe in their 50s and they got a DUI when they were 20. And most prosecutors just tend to not really get excited about that, right? But you can imagine if the one you got when you were 20, you also seriously injured someone and were charged with that too. It just kind of human nature. They're going to get a little more interested. But if you're outside the 10-year window and maybe it's 11 or 12, then what you generally see is, okay, well, you're still punished under a first and 10, but first and 10 has wide ranges. So you're probably not going to get a minimum punishment negotiated plea on a first and 10 if you had a DUI conviction in year 11, right? They're going to want a little more out of you. That's typically the way it affects it, if that makes sense. The range of punishment, it's pretty wide for a first DUI even. So sometimes they go up in the middle to the upper part of the range.
Ted, how do these look back rules directly affect the penalties someone might be facing?
If you get, let's just talk about in terms of a first versus second and 10 in Georgia. So a first and 10 in Georgia, your minimum fine is going to be before all the add-ons and penalties might be $400 or $500 base fine. You've got 40 hours minimum community service that the judge has to give you. Typically on a first DUI, whether the judge makes you go get a clinical evaluation is within the judge's discretion. You always have to take the DUI class, and you're probably always going to have 12 months probation less any time that you actually spend in jail on the night of the arrest, assuming you're not also sent to jail on the conviction. You can, it's a fine up to $1,000 or jail, even on a up to 12 months jail on a first DUI. We just don't see a lot of heavy jail time on a first DUI unless there's a serious injury or something other that exacerbates it. Now, second DUI, the 40 hours community service is now 240 hours minimum. The fines obviously just ratchet up a bit. You might see the minimum on the statute in much more, but what the prosecutor wants is much more. So more fines, and maybe depending on your jurisdiction and was it 9 years ago or was it 1 year ago that you had the other one? Then if it's closer, you may be looking at, they may want some 10 days in jail. Your minimum time in jail on a first DUI is 24 hours, which is usually resolved by crediting it for time served. But your minimum jail time on a second and 10 is going to be pretty much 72 hours. It's technically 10 days, but the judge can probate it back. So those things start moving up. And then when you get to a third, you can imagine it just keeps going.
Where do people tend to get confused about how these timelines apply to their own situation? And the question in my mind is, how long do you have to finish those 40 hours or 240 hours of community service?
Well, they're going to get confused because they're going to go out and try to figure out what, I remember when I started doing DUIs, you have to go back and look at the statute time and again until you kind of get accustomed to what happened. So I wouldn't recommend trying to figure it out by doing your own research. But as far as the time you have to complete these things, I'll say generally that can be negotiable within certain limits. Some judges, they want everything done in 90 days. Some judges are more flexible. If at your plea, you're saying, hey, this is my job and I have 2 kids and, I've all these obligations. The judge can set it. He can say, well, I'm going to give you the entire 12 months probation, or I'm going to give you 6 months. What we do is try to talk to the client ahead of time and see, what do you need to get this done? And there's also ways, Lisa, that we can plan a little better. And when we know where the case is going and give the client an idea, hey, no matter what happens here, you're probably looking at 40 hours community service. Why don't you just go ahead and start working on that? The DUI class, go ahead and take it. After we know a lot about the case, I'm not saying we prejudge them guilty at the beginning. It's not that, but there are certain things that we know are going to be there. Even if we get you out of the DUI, get it reduced to a reckless. So you plan ahead and you do those things before you go down and take your plea. Well, it doesn't matter. You've already done it. So that's another way to beat those deadlines.
Ted, I think where I want to wrap this up today is when someone is dealing with a second or third DUI, how does that prior history start to influence how the case is approached early on?
We certainly know we always start with the baseline. Hey, can we beat this case? And we do the same approach, same job, same detail as if it's your first, because if we can find a way to beat this case, then that changes hopefully all of the rest of it, that we actually beat it or that we get a much better deal than we would have gotten, right, if we had just kind of thrown in the towel. We never do that, but that's one way. But you have to start assessing, okay, where do we think this is going to end up? What are the possibilities? If you go to trial and lose, here's what the judge can do to you, and here's what they're offering if you give them what they want. So you start trying to figure out what is the best option. And sadly for some folks, one of the best options is, hey, this is your third in 5 years. The judge is going to tell you he might actually sentence you to go get some kind of treatment. And I have had plenty of clients that what we've done is encourage them, hey, go ahead before this is resolved. Go ahead and think about it. And if you're ready to admit yourself into a program, it's going to help you. It will help you in court 99 times out of 100 that you went and addressed it. Because I know many judges that we go in front of, when they see you and they know that this will be your third in 10, certainly third in 5, they're wanting to know what you've done to help what they see as a real problem. Whether that really exists or not, that's the way they're looking at it. So we try to forecast that and advise our clients and give them some options to, hey, help yourself. This will come back in a very good light down the road.
And thank you so much for your insights and guidance today. How you walk through this process with your clients is highly respected. So thank you, Ted. That's it for today's episode of DUI Law Real Talk. If you or someone you know is dealing with a DUI in Georgia and has questions about how prior cases may affect what happens next, visit tedmorganlaw.com to schedule a consultation with Ted. And don't forget, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.